good evening. Welcome back to Hellhound's Late Night Spook Show here on the Horror and Metal channel. I figured I'd go ahead and list my top 10 favorite heavy metal musician autobiographies. Yes. Memoirs written by a musician who is actually there. So not biographies, just written by just anybody, but autobiographies written by, well, the person telling the story, you know. Telling their own story in their own words. So let's go ahead and get started. Number 10 is going to be, well, and by the way, these aren't really in like any strict order except for maybe the top 3 or 4. So anyway, 10 is going to be I Am Morbid by David Vincent, formerly of Morbid Angel, the bassist and vocalist on some of their best albums, Altars of Madness, Blessed of the Sick, Covenant. Yeah, he had that awesomely raspy hiss on the first couple albums. He was a great death metal vocalist and great bass player as well. And yeah, this tells his whole story. This tells about his origins in Morbid Angel, you know, meeting Trey Adsigto and working with Pete Sandoval and Richard Brunel, and again, forming some of the other projects, the Genitorturers, which is his wife's band, and then the band I Am Morbid, and his outlaw country band. He's a busy guy when it comes to music. And so, yeah, it was a pretty interesting read just to see the story from his point of view. I wish Trey Adsigto would write one, too. I'd like to see the entire Morbid Angel story, since he's the only member who's been on every single album. He's been there from the beginning and still to this day. Yeah, David Vincent has kind of a funny writing style, kind of like narcissistic a little bit, but kind of you know, in an amusing way, in an enjoyable way. He's not like an egomaniac. He's not like really arrogant or anything. But yeah, he does kind of want to focus more on his current projects, which is fine. I mean, that's admirable, but I did want to read a little bit more details about Morbid Angel and his relationships with his bandmates. But I still recommend this book. It's a really good read. Yeah, I Am Morbid by David Vincent of Morbid Angel. Great book. All right, number 9. I just got this recently. I actually haven't finished it yet. I started reading it last night, and I'm like a little more than halfway through, but I think I know enough to be able to talk about it in a video and rank it. It's going to be Highway Star by Ian Gillen, lead singer of Deep Purple, from the Mark II lineup onwards. That was when he first joined, him and Roger Glover, the bass player, and they're still in the band to this day. There's been a few lineup changes since then. He's been in and out of the band a couple times, and it's all in here. Yeah, he's got that he's got that sharp English wit, that kind of dry sense of humor, like Monty Python and stuff like that. It's pretty funny. He's also a gentleman. He doesn't really put down his fellow, you know, bandmates or even former bandmates, you know, not too harshly anyway. You know, especially even Richie Blackmore, he doesn't talk too badly about. It's kind of cool. He's got some really funny stories to tell. Some of these other books, I kind of knew the story going in, but it was just, you know, different hearing from somebody else's perspective in their own words from somebody who's actually there. This time I didn't really know a whole lot about Ian Gillen's life story. I didn't really know about his childhood or, you know, why he got into music. There are a few details that he could have went into a little more detail about some of these things, but it kind of feels like you just ended up meeting Ian Gillen at a bar and he's just telling you some funny stories. He's telling you about his life, you know, some amusing anecdotes. That's kind of what I think of when I, you know, after reading most of this book. So yeah, Highway Star by Ian Gillen, lead singer of Deep Purple. Wish Richie Blackmore would release one. Ian Gillen's one of my favorite vocalists of all time, by the way. I love Deep Purple. But yeah. Yeah, really good book so far. I look forward to finishing it. Alright, number 8. What Does This Button Do? The autobiography of Bruce Dickinson, lead singer of Iron Maiden. Yes, up the irons. I'll be seeing them in October. I can't freaking wait. I'm so excited. I wish you would heard me get here already. It's going to be a killer show. Looking forward to seeing good old Bruce. Now, here's the thing about this book. Bruce Dickinson wrote the entirety of this himself without a co-author, which is something that these other books can't boast. He didn't have anybody help writing it. He's a writer after all. He's a very interesting person. He's also a pilot. He flies Iron Maiden around, you know, Flight 666 and all that, you know, Ed Force One. Very admirable. He's also a beer brewer. He's into fencing. He's just a very remarkable person. However, if I had to critique this book a little bit in that I feel like some of the more interesting details are glossed over. Some of the things about the music and why he became a singer, and especially, you know, being an Iron Maiden and his relationship with some of his bandmates is kind of glossed over, like I said, in favor of, you know, how airplanes work and writing and beer brewing and fencing. And again, it's very admirable that he can do all that stuff. And it's, like I said, it's very interesting that he wrote this book completely by himself. But I want to appreciate a little more details about the music side of things and about Maiden in general. I also heard that Maiden guitarist Adrian Smith has an autobiography out, Monsters of River and Rock or something, that's like 90% about fishing. It's not about barely any details about being an Iron Maiden and playing guitar. It's mostly about which fishing rod is the best, so that's a hard pass. So this book isn't quite that bad. I haven't read that one, so I'm not judging, but I'm just saying I'm probably not interested from what I've read. I still recommend this book. It's very well written, probably the most well written out of all these books, but it feels a little bit more like a general memoir. You know, I don't fault him at all for leaving out relationships and marriages and family stuff, personal details. But I would just prefer a little bit more talk about, you know, replacing Paul Di'Anno, what it was like fronting a legendary band like Iron Maiden, like kind of, you know, there's a little more detail, and talk about like his relationship with bandmates a little bit. But it's all good. It's still a very well written book, and I definitely recommend it. You should definitely check it out. If you're a Maiden fan, this is a must read. Just had a few issues with it, that's all. You know, not a bad book, not even close. It's a great book. All right, number 7. Like I said, these aren't really in any strict order, but yeah, it's going to be Heavy Duty, Days and Nights in Judas Priest by K.K. Downing. Yeah, I wish he was still in the band. I saw Judas Priest last year, and Richie Faulkner is a great guitarist in his own right, but it's not the same without KK. You know, he played so many of their best albums. His riffs and solos are just one of a kind. Him and Glenn Tipton truly had something remarkable with their guitar duo. And one of the interesting things about this book is I didn't really realize that him and Glenn Tipton weren't like always great friends. They didn't all get along. He said that Glenn Tipton could be kind of controlling at times. It really is sad that he left. He does go into a lot of detail about that. I've only read this one once. I should probably check it out again. But yeah, he's a killer guitarist. There's plenty of details about, you know, first learning to play guitar. That sort of thing really interests me. These musicians, like why they first started to play, you know, an instrument, and like why they, how they found other members and created music together, and how they ended up becoming, you know, famous. This is a really interesting, inspirational story for me, and it's all in there. This is very much about the metal. He talks about his relationship with Rob Halford. He does criticize his ex-bandmates a little too much, because the thing is, he wasn't in the band. You know, now he's got KK's Priest. Yeah, he wasn't in the band when he wrote this, and I really do wish that KK Downing was still in Judas Priest. But hey, what can you do? I hope they all get along someday. Maybe they are on good terms now. Who knows? Of course, poor Glenn Tipton has health issues. Bless his heart. But he was there at the show. He played on a few songs when I saw him in concert. He could still tear it up on guitar. But yeah, Heavy Duty, Days and Nights in Judas Priest by guitarist KK Downing. Oh yeah, one of my favorite bands, one of my favorite musicians. It's a must-read if you're a Priest fan. Number 6, Iron Man by Tony Iommi. Legendary guitarist of Black Sabbath, and my number 1 favorite guitarist ever by far. He's the riff master. He's so creative on the axe. Even after losing the tips of 2 of his fingers, that still didn't stop him from tearing it up on guitar and coming up with the most memorable, most intricate riffs I've ever heard, and inventing heavy metal. That's right, he's the godfather of heavy metal. If you've read Ozzy's autobiography already, this is a really good companion piece, because you get to hear the Sabbath story from another perspective, and then the complete Sabbath story. This is the most complete version of the Sabbath story, because you get to hear it from the one member who's been there from the very beginning. Tony Iommi's the sole constant member who's played guitar in every single one of their albums. He is Sabbath. If anybody is Sabbath, Tony Iommi is Sabbath. You know, I mean, it takes a whole band, of course, and I totally respect all the other members, but if I had to give the most props to one single person, it would definitely be Tony Iommi and his stellar guitar playing. Very unique guitar playing, too. Yeah, Iron Man by Tony Iommi and Black Sabbath. Check it out. Now down to the top 5. But like I said, these aren't really any strict order. Kinda, but, you know, yes and no. I'm the Man by Scott Ian of Anthrax. This is a really fun read. I've read this 3 times already. This book is really exciting, very amusing. There's a little bit too much about, like, skateboarding and baseball and, you know, poker and some things I'm not that interested about. But he does talk about collecting comics and, you know, watching horror movies and some other stuff. He seems like a really cool guy. You know, when it comes to Anthrax, he is the man. He's the, you know, the sole constant member. He's been on every single album. Well, him and drummer Charlie Benante have been on all their albums. But if you want to hear the story of Anthrax, of course, it's got to be from Scott Ian. And yeah, it's a pretty funny story. Some pretty amusing anecdotes. Just a highly entertaining read. Thoroughly fascinating. If you're an Anthrax fan, definitely check out I'm the Man by Scott Ian. Because when it comes to Anthrax, this is the most complete version of the story you'll ever hear. All right, number 4. Rainbow in the Dark by Ronnie James Dio. Oh yeah, my hero, my idol, one of my favorite vocalists of all time. I love watching his interviews. I love his sharp wit and his well-spoken articulation. Like, he would just he has such great diction and verbalization skills, and he was a gentleman. But he was very honest too, and I totally admire that and respect that about him. Good old Ronnie James. Rest in peace. Yeah, his death hit me the hardest. He has a great book, and this one's totally about the music. There's some things about, like, car chases and other stuff, but it's really exciting. It never lets up, and you're never bored when you're reading this excellent book. Yeah, he talks about his time in Elf, all the bands that preceded Elf, and of course Rainbow, Sabbath, and of course the eponymous Dio. He talks about his relationship with Richie Blackmore, Tony Iommi, and several other members that he's worked with. The only bad thing about this book is, which is nobody's fault, is that it's too short. He was in the middle of writing it when he sadly passed of stomach cancer. Yeah, once again, rest in peace. Like I said, he was my hero. I got his autograph over there. I've showed it in a few videos. And the thing is, this book it only goes up to the Sacred Heart tour and the acquisition of guitarist Craig Goldie and the Dio band. And yeah, Wendy Dio, his widow, his wife, and Mick Wall finished it for him. It only goes up to that point, so it's not really a complete story. We don't get to hear about, when he rejoined Sabbath and released a Humanizer, or the second time when they went to the Heaven and Hell moniker and released Devil You Know. But it's all in there about why he left Sabbath the first time with, during the recording of Live Evil, their first live album. Yeah, his relationship with Richie Blackmore, why he left Rainbow, how he became famous, how he started out playing the trumpet and then switched to bass and switched to vocals. Very interesting story. And yeah, you can kind of tell that, like, his wife, his widow, and Mick Wall kind of filled in the blanks. They took things from interviews and videos and, like, manuscripts. I guess he had a lot of notes written, so again, it does feel very incomplete and is way too short because it's not the complete Dio story, but hey, it's better than nothing. I'm really glad that he did manage to get as much out there as he did, because he was my hero, and I couldn't wait to read the story from his own words. And this is the closest thing we'll ever get to that. Like I said, it's unfinished, but still really killer read. Rainbow in the Dark by Ronnie James Dio, the master of metal. Number 3, Mustaine by, obviously, Dave Mustaine from Megadeth. One of my favorite guitarists from one of my favorite bands. And I'll be seeing them next month in September. Less than a month away. Oh, I can't wait. It's going to be sick. Yeah, it's all in there as well. His relationship with Metallica, joining Metallica, why he was kicked out, everything. His relationship with all his bandmates, Chris Poland, Gar Samuelson, Marty Friedman, Nick Menza, Jeff Young, Al Petrelli. It's all in there. He's the head honcho when it comes to Megadeth. David Ellefson, the bass player, who's no longer with them now. He won't be there next month, unfortunately. But they got James Lomenzo, so he's great too. He's a great bass player as well. But yeah, it's just kind of funny how he kind of frequently puts down almost everybody he's ever worked with, every former bandmate, every producer, every manager. It's like he's hardly ever admits when he's wrong. He went to rehab like 15 times, and then I think David Ellefson went for him one time pretending to be him, and he ended up getting clean and sober. Really funny stories, and I really do like reading about when he was in Metallica, what led to him being kicked out, what led to him, working from the ground up and starting from scratch and building Megadeth. I mean, it's a very inspirational story. You're kicked out of a band that becomes hugely successful and takes over the world, and you start another band from the ground up and become almost just as successful, even to the point where a lot of people prefer Megadeth over Metallica today. I do think I prefer the current Megadeth to the current Metallica, but those first 3 Metallica albums are pretty unbeatable. The Rust in Peace and Peace Cells come very, very close, almost equal, really. It's a close one. But anyway, if you want to read the full Megadeth story, check out Mustaine by Dave Mustaine. Oh, yeah. And I'll let you guys know what I think after I see the concert next month. Number 2, Confess by Rob Halford and Judas Priest, my favorite vocalist in the world, heavy metal or otherwise. Yeah, the interesting thing about this book is I knew a lot about the Judas Priest story. I knew that they had a singer named Al Atkins at the beginning. I knew that, K.K. Downing and Ian Hill pretty much formed the band, and there for a while they were the only members who were on every album. Then how they acquired Glenn Tipton, how they went through so many different drummers, and then, of course, how they met up with Rob Halford, because I did read KK's book first. This came out first. Yeah, Heavy Duty came out first. But I couldn't wait to read this, because he's another one of my heroes. He's the metal god. And yeah, I knew about most of it, but there's a lot of things I didn't know about his personal life. Yeah, it confesses appropriate title because he's very, very honest. He doesn't hold back anything. He's very, very humble, very modest. He explains every mistake he's ever made. He talks about where his mind was. He's gone through a lot of things, and it's really inspiring to hear all these obstacles that he overcame. Yeah, Rob Halford, he's a very interesting person. I'd love to meet him someday. Like I said, I saw Priest live a couple months ago, and it was amazing. He could still belt it out. He's my favorite singer in the world when it comes to metal. He's the metal god, like I already said. And it's all in here. Confess. The autobiography about Rob Halford and Judas Priest, my second favorite autobiography. He goes into so much detail. It's a great, great read. I could not put this book down because it's awesome. And the number one best metal musician autobiography is I Am Aussie by, obviously, the Prince of Darkness himself, Ozzy Osbourne. Oh my gosh, this book is friggin' hilarious. I've read it 3 times now. It's that entertaining. Oh my gosh, it's incredible how much this guy's endured. He could have, like, he cheated death like 1,000 times. You know, the drugs, the diseases, the really crazy daredevil-like stunts, the fact that he was hardly ever sober a day in his life. It's really interesting they turned his life around and is now sober and everything. Yeah, very interesting. It's also a very inspiring rags to riches stories. I mean, they were dirt poor. Birmingham was a very depressing place back in like the 50s and 60s, and they were just dirt poor. His family, like, he'd wear the same clothes every day. He didn't have any shoes. His parents were working all the time. They barely could afford all their kids. He had like so many siblings. You know, they didn't have, you know, they couldn't barely afford food. He got bullied in school. He started with like nothing, like rock bottom, and now he's a multi-billionaire. He's hugely successful, and he always surrounded himself with great musicians. And yeah, the Sabbath stories in here, how Black Sabbath was formed, how it was just 4 guys who had the same dream, and how his dad buying him a PA system pretty much led to him being the Prince of Darkness someday and having Ozfest and the Osbournes reality show. That's all in there. He wasn't really a big fan of being part of that, which is kind of interesting. The tragic death of Randy Rhoads is in there. Rest in peace. Yeah, his relationship with Zakk Wylde, why he was kicked out of Sabbath, you know, how they did the reunions, how he founded Ozfest. Yeah, it's all in there. Yeah, very, very interesting person. And lots of really funny, highly entertaining stories in here. It's just fascinating. He's done some really crazy stuff, you know. Oh yeah, good old Ozzy. But yeah, I highly recommend this book. It's just a phenomenal read. Like I said, I've read it 3 times, and I'll probably read it several more times. I Am Aussie by, obviously, Ozzy Osbourne of Black Sabbath and his self-titled solo band, the Prince of Darkness himself. My favorite metal musician autobiography. All right, guys. Well, I know there's a lot of other good autobiographies out there by metal musicians. I know Lemmy has one that I like to read. Alex Skolnick of Testament has one. Rex Brown of Pantera. Max Cavalera of Sepultura. Glenn Hughes, who's been in several of my favorite bands. You know, Deep Purple and Black Sabbath, most notably. I know David Ellefson has a couple. Dan Mustaine, Ozzy, and Scott Ian all have another one, too. I think Frank Bello from Anthrax also has one. Yeah, there's all kinds of books of other autobiographies I like to read. So when I get my hands on them, I'll let you guys know what I think. Be sure to let me know what your favorite heavy metal or just music in general autobiographies are in the comments below. As always, thank you for watching the Horror and Metal channel. I'm a Hellhound. Till next time, later.